Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Before we get started this week, I'd like to extend an invitation to you all. In addition to the podcast, we are also running a short weekly newsletter each Sunday, where we send out exclusive stories and urban legends, interesting articles, reviews, and recommendations for all things Japanese horror. You'll also be the first to find out about what's coming up, discounts on horror goods, and any freebies that might be available. You can join at kowabana.net/newsletter. You'll also get 2 free books for signing up. Hope to see you there. On this week's show, we have 2 stories of women from beyond the grave. Something hasn't allowed them to move on. But why? What do they want? Do they just want help? Or something more sinister? Our first story for this week is called The Woman's True Motives. This took place about 10 years ago, when I was hospitalized from an accident. Today, I'd like to tell you about my terrifying experience there. I hate hospitals. I've got goosebumps just thinking about what happened. It was terrible. I had graduated from high school and was attending a local technical school. But about a month after starting the new school year, I was hit by a car and broke my right leg. It took 3 months to heal entirely, and I was admitted to the hospital near where I was hit. It was infamous around town as a haunted hospital. Why, of all places, did it have to be this hospital? I was beyond depressed. The businessman who hit me dropped by the hospital after work each day, and his heart must have hurt seeing me so lifeless like that. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't upset because of the broken leg. I was upset because I was in that hospital. Behind the hospital stood a mountain, and in front of it, a river. There was an old cemetery on the mountain surrounded by thick forest, and to reach the hospital, you had to cross over a thin stone bridge out the front. Before the bridge was a dark tunnel with a faded center line, and apparently, that tunnel was haunted as well. When I arrived at the hospital right after the accident, I saw countless pale faces looking down at me in the ambulance from the hospital windows. Of course, they weren't the faces of the living. As they were pushing me towards the operating room on the stretcher, I was absent-mindedly looking up at the roof and saw numerous legs dangling there. In the corner of the operating room, several people who had died there were facing the wall, muttering something. The doctor performed temporary measures on my broken leg, but when I screamed out in pain, the spirits disappeared. A short while later they returned again. Would I be able to escape from the hospital alive? The shock of the accident was causing me to see things more vividly than ever before. I tried not to pay attention, but it was painfully clear that the hospital existed in another plane as well. Perhaps they were unable to wait any longer, but after lunch, an endless stream of my friends from school came to see me. Late at night, a few days later, I was asleep when an ambulance came in. Another accident? I wasn't terribly concerned and went back to sleep. The next day, I asked Yamada-san, my hospital roommate, about what happened. Our hospital room fit 6, but at the time, Only 3 patients were using it. But neither Yamada-san nor Kato-san, the other patient, knew anything about it. Both of them were elderly. Maybe their hearing wasn't so good. I put it out of my mind, but the next night, another ambulance arrived. My bed was next to the window. I looked outside and saw the red siren lights flashing. Again? I thought, and went back to sleep. I woke up the next morning during our regular blood collection. I asked the nurse about the ambulance from the night before, but she said there was no emergency cases that night. What are you saying? Last night and the night before, I saw an ambulance, I said. She looked at me strangely. How odd. Was it all a dream? Come to think of it, I realized I hadn't seen any people from the other side for several days. That night, I explored the hospital in a wheelchair to see if I could find any ghosts. It was strange. When I was brought to the hospital, I saw so many. But now, I didn't even see any outside. Did I lose my ability to see ghosts after the accident? If that was the case, then whatever. I returned to my room with a vague sense of relief. I don't know if the other 2 guys were already asleep or not, but their curtains were closed. I got into bed and drifted off to sleep. How long passed? Something red moving in front of my eyes woke me up. It was the ambulance light. What the hell? Another emergency? I got up and looked out the window. The ambulance was there. The patient was just being transferred to a stretcher, but something was off. It was quiet. Too quiet. My room was on the 2nd floor, meaning I was close enough to be able to hear the sound of the ambulance and people talking. Then, when I looked at the patient on the stretcher, terror ran through my veins. Why was... It was me. The patient being put on the stretcher was me. I was looking at myself. My mind was a mess. My heart pounded 1,000 miles an hour, and I trembled while looking at me. Even more odd than that, I couldn't see the faces of the doctors and nurses who were helping me. Either way, they put me on the stretcher and then strapped the belts so that I couldn't move. But even stranger than all of that, they didn't take the stretcher inside the hospital. They turned and pushed it in the other direction, towards the bridge. I realized I was watching myself struggle. I was yelling something, but I couldn't hear it. Shit. I grabbed my crutches and ran downstairs. The lights in the hospital were out, and silence fell over the halls. I got on the elevator and pushed the button for the 1st floor. Yet for some reason, after it started, it seemed to keep going. We must have gone down about 10 floors. The hospital only had 1 basement level. Just how far exactly was it going down? Suddenly it banged and stopped. The button for B1 was lit up. Odd. I definitely pressed the button for the 1st floor. I didn't know what was going on, but I pressed the button for the 1st floor again. But no matter how many times I pressed it, there was no response. The light for B1 stayed lit. Then I saw something through the open doors. Someone was walking slowly towards the elevator. It looked like they were pushing a stretcher. I looked past them towards the wall and gasped. Morgue was written on the wall behind them. Shit, I thought, and frantically pressed the button for the first floor again. The stretcher wheels creaked and got closer. The basement was pitch black, and something was coming towards me. The ambulance, and now this. There was clearly something not right here. I cried in terror and hit the first floor button, and finally it lit up. The door started to close immediately. The sound that had been slowly coming towards me suddenly picked up speed and drew closer. I screamed and closed my eyes. The doors clanged as they closed. No, they didn't close. Not exactly. The doors were open about 10 centimeters. Something was jammed in there. I nervously looked down, and there was a white hand gripping my ankle through the doors. I turned pale with fear and kicked the white hand in a daze, but it was unyielding. Then the doors opened again. Terrified, I raised my head slowly. A girl with long hair and a white face was dangling above me. I passed out. What was making that noise? I woke up. I was looking at the night sky. Choking humidity and the stench of forest pierced my nostrils. My body was frozen. Where was I? I looked down at my feet and saw something was tying me down. I couldn't see very well, but I appeared to be on a stretcher. It started moving. A building rose before me. It was the hospital. Someone was very clearly looking down at me from my hospital room. It was that girl. The girl that grabbed my ankle in the basement. I screamed, sensing that if I didn't do something, I was about to die. I screamed and struggled with all my might, but nothing came out. The stretcher rolled away from the hospital and towards the bridge. Strangely, I couldn't tell who was pushing it. I couldn't see well. I struggled in fear, my body stiff as a board, but my hands and feet were bound. A concrete ceiling came into view above me. The tunnel. I remembered the end of the tunnel was a dead end. It turned into a cliff. Shit. If I kept going, I'd die, but I couldn't move. I turned to look at the hospital on the other side of the river. What the hell was that? An immense number of bodies were climbing the bank towards the hospital. The moment I saw it, I remembered. The site the hospital was built on was originally an aircraft factory. Workers from North Korea were forced to work on the site during the war, and many of them died in B-29 attacks. My mind went blank, fear and hope fighting for space. The edge of the cliff was getting closer. All the life drained from my body. It was no good. At that moment, a bright light shone down on me. Hey, somebody's there. Are you okay? Hold on. It was a voice I knew. Relieved, I passed out. The next morning, I woke up in the hospital, but it wasn't the same hospital. My mother was beside me, and I asked her what happened. Apparently, the night before, the hospital was set on fire. After somebody got me out on a stretcher, the boiler room in the basement went up in flames and set the entire hospital ablaze. Several people who were unable to escape in time died. I was dumbfounded. One of my friends found me and brought me to the hospital. He was visiting the tunnel for a test of courage, and they had just arrived when they saw me. They didn't see anyone else though. I was all alone. While they were helping me, they heard an explosion and the hospital went up in flames. Things went insane. After I was released from the hospital, I returned to the bridge with my friend to lay some flowers. Looking at the remains of the hospital, it was pitiful. The girl I saw that time, was she trying to drag me in? Or was she trying to help me? I don't know. Either way, I was saved. We said a silent prayer and put the hospital behind us. After that, I found the hospital even more unpleasant than before. Our next story is about a young woman who runs afoul of the Yakuza and her boyfriend who did nothing to stop it. Find out what really happened to her in Harumi's Final Days. This all took place about 10 years ago. I was working at a rundown snack bar in the middle of nowhere and had gotten friendly with one of the girls who also worked there. You know what I'm talking about, right? Before long, we were living together. The boss and the other employees all knew about it. We were having a ball together, until... Anyway, I'll call her Harumi. Harumi was really into gambling. Pachinko, horses, boats, cycling, poker, mahjong, you name it. That would be all well and good if she ever won, but she sucked at it. It takes skills to be good at gambling, and she didn't have any. Just as you'd expect, she was soon up to her neck in debt, but somehow she slowly started paying it back. Huh? What about me? I don't gamble. Betting a large amount of money on something where I might win or lose, that's not for me. I'm surprisingly stable. Anyway, back to the story. It was about 2 years after we first started living together. She was left with nowhere else to go. At her wit's end, she borrowed money from the one place you shouldn't, the Yakuza. One night, when just the two of us were home, 2 men showed up. Looking at them, I could immediately tell who they were. You can probably guess what happened after that. It was exactly like what you see in TV and the movies. Laughably so. They threatened her that if she couldn't pay them back, they'd force her into the sex industry. And even so, Harumi kept working while putting them off, telling them to wait just another week, and then just another month. Huh? What about me? I didn't do anything. They were Yakuza. I'm not a fighter. What's that? You can't just leave her like that. You live together. Yeah, that's quite right. But perhaps one day, if you're ever in my position, you'll understand. We were in our apartment again one night when, as usual, debt collectors came to visit. But there was something different about them this time. What do you call them? The top brass? The big guys came. After they were done talking with Harumi, they headed determinedly in my direction. "Are you her man?" they asked. It wasn't like I could pretend otherwise, so I said yes. "Can you pay back her debt?" they asked. Of course I couldn't. Her debt had already grown to close to 10 million yen by that point. I told them I could not. Then one of the guys, he kinda looked like Kitamura Kazuki. But anyway, this guy says that if that's so, then he'll take the girl. I was ready to give up. As long as what she did didn't harm me, she could do whatever she wanted. Huh? What's that? I'm an ogre? A demon? A brute? Sure, why not? But when it comes to the nighttime entertainment business, you've got to kill any heart you have. I wasn't in love with Harumi. I just wanted her body. What's that? I really am a brute? Yeah, probably. That's fine. Getting back to the story, the man then said something strange. "I'll give you this if you forget about her and never speak of this again." It was a bloated brown envelope. Exactly 1 million yen was inside. But it's not exactly the nicest thing in the world, is it? Receiving money from the Yakuza. Somewhere down the road they might come back and try to collect on that money. With interest. So, I refused it. The little punk with the head honcho then took out a Polaroid and took my picture. The big guy told me he'd kill me if I didn't accept the money. Why is this happening to me? I thought. Reluctantly, I took the money. Then he told me, "If you tell anyone about this, no matter where you are, I will find you and kill you. Got it?" After that, it was a bit vague, but I thought that Harumi probably wouldn't be plunged into the sex industry, but they'd use her for something else instead. Something even worse. They packed some of Harumi's clothes and other items into a bag and took her away. She didn't look at me as they left, just walked straight by me. She was a tough woman. Left alone in the apartment, I sat there dumbfounded for a while. I thought I'd quit work the next day and move someplace new. It was horrible, having the Yakuza know where I lived. Suddenly, my eyes were drawn to Harumi's dresser. There was a box on top, with a ribbon. Inside it was the watch I'd wanted for ages. Oh yeah, come to think of it, the next day was my birthday. Even I shed a tear over that. I realized that was the first moment I fell in love with Harumi. So then you went to the Yakuza's head office and took Harumi back, right? This ain't the movies. This is reality. And this is the story of a disheartened man. I quit work the next day and decided to move someplace new with the 1 million yen I'd received. I wanted to get as far away as possible, so I moved from the town that was famous for its mentaiko all the way to the town that was famous for its snow festival. I figured I'd make that the place to start my new life. I found somewhere to live, and with that settled, started looking for work. I didn't want to work in the nighttime entertainment industry anymore, but I wondered if there was anything out there for a nocturnal person like me. Then I found the perfect job: a nighttime security guard. I went to the interview, and a few days later I was employed. 10 years have passed since then. Surprisingly, for a guy who gets bored with things easily, I'm still at the same job. Huh? What about Harumi? Sometimes I think about her. I've worn that watch she bought for me ever since. I've had girlfriends since then, and it's been alright, but I lead a pretty ordinary life. Folks tell me I kinda look like Kawasaki Mayo, you know? What's that? No one asked. The hostesses are just being polite. How rude. Anyway, about a month ago, one of my colleagues, M, said he had this amazing video. I figured it would be some skeevy porn or something. I'd borrowed such videos from him several times before. But then he was like, "Have you ever heard of snuff videos?" I'm a guy that likes the internet and looks up all sorts of stuff in his free time. So yeah, I'd heard the term before. Overseas websites are pretty amazing. They have videos of real deaths and dead bodies and so on. Anyway, he got this video from a certain source and wanted to bring it to work that day to watch together. Our break time is around 3 a.m. I figured it'd be a good way to pass the time, so why not? I suspected it was just a fake anyway. He put the video in the player and pressed play. A young, naked woman was lying in a cage. All her hair had been shaved off. All of it. I don't know if she was drugged, but she wasn't moving. Only her eyes darted around the place violently. It was Harumi. I wanted to stand up, but for some reason, I couldn't move. Before long, they put a giant anaconda in the cage through some sort of giant tube. I'm not even joking. It had to have been over 10 meters long. It slowly approached Harumi. M kept going, "Amazing, right?" All proud of himself and looking in my direction. The large body slowly wrapped itself around Harumi. They must have done something to her tongue or vocal cords. Her face was petrified, but she never uttered a sound. Something cracked, like the sound of chips in a bag. Harumi's body went soft, like a boneless mollusk. 10 minutes must have passed before it opened its large mouth and swallowed her head. This goes on for a while, M said, and fast-forwarded the video. When the snake was done swallowing her head, then it started on her shoulders. By the time she was halfway inside, the tape ended. M said there were 2 more tapes after that. I told him I'd seen enough and left to patrol the area. I just wanted to get away. Ever since then, I've been having the same dream. A giant snake with Harumi's face wraps itself around me, squeezing me. When all my bones are broken, Harumi starts devouring me. It's so painful that it almost loops all the way around to pleasant again. as I'm slowly dissolving inside her stomach. It's like I've returned to the safety of my mother's womb. And what did I do about the videos, you ask? I bought all of them from M. It cost me nearly an entire month's wage. After I watched them all, I cried for a bit and then destroyed them. Late at night, when I was working, I could feel Harumi around. I was patrolling the inside of a building by myself when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but nobody was there. When I started walking again, there was a sound like a wet rag hitting the floor. Is that Harumi? I wondered, but she never showed herself. I could sense her, and I could hear her footsteps, but that was it. This went on for a few days, and of course it started to affect me mentally. At the moment I'm on leave, a holiday, if you will. 3 days ago, Harumi showed herself. I was lying awake in bed, late at night, smoking a cigarette and staring at the ceiling. The white smoke started to dance before my eyes. I figured it was just the smoke from the cigarette, but the movement was strange. It was like it was alive, dancing and waving in front of me as it took shape. It was Harumi. Her bones broken, swinging like a marionette, her body dissolving. The single eyeball she still had left stared at me. Her mouth was moving, like she wanted to say something, but perhaps her tongue was missing or her throat cut, but she couldn't make a sound. How long passed? Before I knew it, she disappeared. It's a bit embarrassing, but I wet myself. Sorry. Harumi appeared again the next night. I started to think that it wouldn't be so bad if she killed me. I even started looking forward to seeing her. Her mouth kept moving, like she was trying to tell me something. I rushed over. Do you want to say something? What should I do? The watch. The watch. Thank you for the watch. I'm sorry I didn't do anything that time. I'm taking good care of the watch. The watch. The watch. I screamed over and over like a madman. She valiantly lifted her broken neck and approached me. Then she spoke, brokenly, but perfectly clear. I wanted to have your child. She's coming to see me again tonight. And that brings us to the end of this week's show. Don't forget, you can join our newsletter at kowabana.net/newsletter for exclusive and interesting horror straight to your inbox. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Tara A. Devlin. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.